In January, Ryan Day became the latest head coach to win their first national championship. And it might feel wild to think about, but he joined a pretty exclusive group in college football right now. There are not a lot of coaches who have national championships under their belt that are coaching in college football right now. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense, right? Nick Saban won a lot of them and retired. Jim Harbaugh won a national championship, bolted to the NFL. Mac Brown retired. It's like Dabo Swinney and now Ryan Day and Kirby Smart. It's not a big group of coaches who have been to the pinnacle of the sport. And so that logically leads to the question of who's maybe next to take that step to be the next coaches to win the national championship for the first time. And so I've compiled a list of guys who I think are right there that are going to be on the cusp of being the guys who get their first national championship sooner rather than later. And I will preface this by saying I am more than willing to be wrong on some of these, because there's a name or two that I've gone out on a limb that I don't think is all that sturdy. So here are my 5 guys that I think are the best chance to win the national championship for the first time. I started the list with Steve Sarkisian at Texas because I think that obviously in his first couple of seasons, Steve Sarkisian has done a really good job at Texas and has them in position to be a really, really good team year after year. I think Steve Sarkisian winning a national championship at Texas is more of a when rather than an if. And I feel somewhat similar to the next 2 guys on my list of Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame and Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. For Marcus Freeman to have Notre Dame in the national championship this early into his tenure makes me feel as if that is an inevitability rather than I wonder if they're going to get this done. Alabama has been one of, if not the best job in college football for a long time. And I think Kalen DeBoer is a really good coach. So I think it's a matter of if not, or I think it's a matter of when, not if, that Kalen DeBoer wins the national championship at Alabama. But I think it's somewhat interesting that, like, Marcus Freeman has Notre Dame at a national championship caliber, and undeniably a national championship caliber, this early into a season. And Alabama fans might already be thinking, considering, questioning if Kalen DeBoer was the right guy to replace Nick Saban. And if he's not, I think there's a decent chance one of the following 2 people replace Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, and that's Lane Kiffin and Curt Cignetti. I don't think Lane Kiffin or Curt Cignetti are going to win national championships at Ole Miss or Indiana. And those are the 2 that I feel like I'm going out on the limb on the most. And I recognize that Lane Kiffin might be a controversial name to have on this list because of the people who aren't on this list. The last 3 head coaches at LSU, Nick Saban, Les Miles, Ed Orgeron, won national championships. I don't have Brian Kelly on this list. And Brian Kelly famously left Notre Dame to go to LSU because in his eyes, LSU offered a better chance to win a national championship. And you know what? He might be right. And so I understand the idea that Brian Kelly would feel like an inevitability that he is going to win a national championship at LSU. I don't see it that way. I don't think Brian Kelly's a great fit at LSU. And right now it is a marriage of convenience and not out of lust and love and passion. And I think the second that a job that would be on par with LSU pops up and shows interest in Brian Kelly, he's out the door. Because I think Brian Kelly thinks he made a mistake. Now, to be fair, to his credit, there was a lot of talk that, oh, hey, Brian Kelly left Notre Dame because he couldn't win a national championship. He thought it was going to be easier at LSU, and look where Marcus Freeman has the Fighting Irish. Well, Marcus Freeman has accomplished the same things that Brian Kelly has accomplished, and that is not winning a national championship at Notre Dame. I just think Marcus Freeman's a little bit more built for today's college football than Brian Kelly is, because for better or worse, if you're the head coach of a Power 4 college football program, and not even just a Power 4, if you are the head coach of a blue blood program, you've got to wear every mistake that's been made. You've got to carry the burden, fair or unfair, every time something goes wrong. And Marcus Freeman does that, and Brian Kelly doesn't. So if you're a high-profile recruit, you can go to Notre Dame where you know that the coach is going to have your back, or you can go to LSU and go where the coach is maybe as well known for having his face turn a shade of red we've never really seen before, while mother bleeping guys up and down the sidelines and then going on a press conference and saying that it's everybody else's fault but mine. Or you can go where the guy is going to have your back. That stuff's going to matter to college football recruits. So I think Marcus Freeman's a little bit more equipped to handle today's recruit rather than Brian Kelly is. But I'm keenly aware that it's likely that one of or none of the three of Kalen DeBoer, Lane Kiffin, and Curt Cignetti win the national championship. But Kalen DeBoer has won everywhere he's been. The idea that he is now going to be the head coach who fails massively at either the best or one of the best jobs in the sport feels wildly off base to me. If you've won everywhere else, you then are coupled with the resources to win. That's like putting cheese and bacon on top of a hamburger. You put all good things that are good together, you're going to have excellence. So I have faith that Kalen DeBoer leads Alabama to the national championship. And if he doesn't, I think there's a decent chance that Alabama turns to one of these three names. Lane Kiffin, which would then put him on my list. Curt Cignetti, former Alabama position coach, has done a masterful job at Indiana. Now they have to sustain that for him to be in the running to be the Alabama head coach. Or Dan Lanning at Oregon. And I didn't put Dan Lanning at Oregon on this list just for the same reason that I believe Dan Lanning is a really good coach. Just like I believe that Mike Elko at Texas A&M is a really good coach. Just like I believe Josh Heupel at Tennessee is a really good coach. But in the case of Texas A&M and in the case of Oregon, if you haven't done this one thing, in Oregon's case, for 140 years or since 1898, you've been playing this sport and you've never won the national championship. And I think it's fair to question if you'll ever win the national championship. And in Texas A&M's case, we do this song and dance every year with their recruiting classes and every time they hire a new coach. This is going to be the guy that's going to turn Texas A&M. A&M should be the best program in the country. It should be the best job in the country. If it's not the best job in the country, it's one of the 5 best jobs in the country. And time after time after time, we go through this song and dance, and time after time after time, it doesn't live up to that hype. Now, the argument could be, oh, well, they've just hired the wrong coach 14 times in a row, or it's just not as great of a job as everybody thinks it is. It's just not as easy to win there as everybody thinks it is. It's the same thing, and to a much lesser degree, by the way, that people will talk about the job at Maryland as if it's this sleeping giant. All you've got to do is keep the kids from the DMV, Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. All you got to do is keep those kids at Maryland, and you're going to be a really, really good program. Oh, so you mean all I've got to do is the thing that nobody else has ever been able to do? Well, maybe it's just not as simple as that. It's not just incompetence. Thus, I don't have Mike Elko on here. Now, maybe Mike Elko wins the national championship someday as Kirby Smart's replacement at Georgia, or the replacement for Billy Napier at Florida, or a somewhat blue blood, well-built SEC or Big Ten program in the future. But I don't think Lane Kiffin's going to win the title at Ole Miss. I think Lane Kiffin's going to win the title at Florida or at LSU or at Alabama. I don't think Curt Cignetti's going to win the title at Indiana. I think Curt Cignetti's going to win the title at LSU or Alabama or Florida or Georgia or someday maybe at Texas. And that's as much. I don't put James Franklin on this list because I don't think James Franklin's ever going to win the national championship at Penn State. It's a lot harder than people think it is, as evidenced by Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, and Ryan Day are the guys in college football who have won a title. So maybe even picking 5 names is a bit ambitious. But I think those bottom 3, outside of, I feel strongly that Steve Sarkisian and Marcus Freeman both someday hoist the gold trophy at the end of the day. At the end of a college football season, to me, those 2 guys will lead blue blood programs back to the mountaintop. I think those other 3 are interconnected. And it's about location as much as it is about ability. Because there are really good football coaches all over the land. It's about being in the right place at the right time with the right situation. And it matters as much about what goes on outside of your program as it does what matters inside of your program. But I think it's going out on a limb maybe to say Lane Kiffin and Curt Cignetti someday win national titles. I would feel even maybe pretty strongly that Kalen DeBoer inevitably wins a championship at Alabama. But there's a reason the list isn't super long right now of who has been to the pinnacle of the sport right now. And it's because it's way more difficult than people think it is. I want to know your thoughts. Who do you think is going to be the next coach to win their first national championship? Do you feel differently? Do you think Dan Lanning will someday lead Oregon to the promised land? Do you think that James Franklin gets over the hump and gets Penn State to the title? I want to know your thoughts in the comments below. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.